Guys, I saw this last night, and I saw quite a few other things, and I thought they were a bit more important, but I was not going to pass on this one. We're constantly being told how the Republican Party loves us, and we need to give them a chance, and some of these coonish black people are stating to us that we need to come off of the Democratic plantation, and what have the Democrats done for us, etc., etc., etc. And to be honest with you, some of the things that they say are or have merit, but quite a bit of them don't. Especially the part about the Republican Party loving black people. Now, this is a segment from the Rachel Maddow show last night that, in my mind, demonstrates the love that the Republican Party has for us, both in the past and presently. Here we go with the Rachel Maddow segment.
New Jersey is one of those states that holds its statewide elections in off years, right? So their governor's race in New Jersey was not in 2012 when everybody else had theirs. It was in 2013. The next one will be in the fall of 2017. They hold their statewide elections in odd-numbered years. New Jersey's been that way for a long time. Virginia's the same way. But there aren't very many states who do that. One of the consequences of being an off-year election state is when those states elect their governor in these weird, odd-numbered years, they don't have a lot of competition for attention, right? There aren't a lot of other big top-of-the-ticket statewide races going on around the country to compete for everybody's dollars, to compete for everybody's attention, to compete for the national parties to get involved. And just by virtue of the weird schedule, statewide races in these off-year states can get a bunch of national attention. And that's what happened in New Jersey in 1981. So, right, in context, that was a year after Ronald Reagan got elected to the presidency for the first time in 1980. The year after that, November of 1981, New Jersey had its governor's race. And in that governor's race in 1981, the National Republican Party, newly energized from that huge win with Reagan and how they took all those seats in Congress and the Senate, right? The Republican Party decided they had another shot to go for another big race. And they decided to basically flood the zone in that New Jersey governor's race in 1981. The Republicans flew in national political operatives. They launched this very aggressive scheme where they challenged the registration of thousands of New Jersey voters who turned up to the polls in Newark and Camden and Trenton.
Newark, Camden, and Trenton. Why do those three cities seem so familiar to me? I know I'm originally from New York, and going across the bridge, through the tunnels, etc., did that quite a bit when I was back there. But Newark, Camden, and Trenton. Oh, I know what it is. All three of those cities are predominantly populated by black people. Oh, okay.
And in about 75 minority-heavy precincts across New Jersey that year in that race, they put up these 4-foot-tall warning signs. When I first saw images of these signs online and in old newspaper articles and stuff, I thought these were like flyers. I thought they were the size of a piece of paper. They stapled them up on telephone poles or something. No, these warning signs were full-on sandwich board posters. They were like bus stops, 4-foot-tall signs that they put up outside of polling places. And they say, warning, this area is being patrolled by the National Ballot Security Task Force. It is a crime to falsify a ballot or to violate election laws. And they were not bluffing. The RNC did actually invent something called a Ballot Security Task Force and put these guys on patrol in minority-heavy precincts in New Jersey during that governor's race. And it's interesting. They were very stealth about it. Nobody had any advance warning they were coming. This Republican operation just showed up on Election Day and nobody knew to expect it. They had off-duty police officers and sheriff deputies carrying walkie-talkies, wearing Ballot security task force armbands. Many of them were also openly carrying guns, and they stalked around polling places in minority-heavy districts while they demanded that election workers strike these people off the voting rolls.
Several of these signs were reported at polling places in Newark's North Ward. Republican poll watchers, some of them off-duty policemen wearing guns and armbands, were also near the polls. It was all part of the National Ballot Security Task Force set up by the Republican national and state committees to guard against vote fraud. But Democrats charge it was a scare campaign to intimidate voters, primarily in minority neighborhoods.
Yeah, you think? I mean, who knows how many people were blocked or intimidated from voting in that election in New Jersey in 1981. But as voter suppression schemes go, this one pretty clearly worked. Both parties in later years would claim that it definitely worked. There were about 3 million votes cast in that governor's race. It was decided by less than 1,800 votes, and the Republican won. And then the Democrats sued. The Democrats sued the Republican Party over this ballot security task force stunt. And you know who the Republicans used as their lawyer to defend them in that case? Donald Trump's brother-in-law, the Crazy Eddie guy, who was married to Donald Trump's sister. He was the lawyer for the Republican Party in that case in New Jersey. And he got creamed in court. I mean, the damage was already done in terms of that governor's race. The Republicans won that election by this many votes, right? And the Democrats weren't going to be able to get that election back. But what the Democrats did get was something called a consent decree, which bans the Republican National Committee from doing this kind of thing again, from doing anything like this. It prohibits them from being involved in any poll-watching shenanigans that specifically target minority voters. And now today, in 2016, now the snake starts eating its own tail, because now in 2016, it is not Donald Trump's brother-in-law, it's now Donald Trump who is losing that exact case all over again for the Republican National Committee.
Go down to certain areas and watch and study and make sure other people don't come in and vote 5 times. So important that you watch other communities, because we don't want this election stolen from us. So go and vote, and then go check out areas, because a lot of bad things happen. When I say watch, you know what I'm talking about, right? You know what I'm talking about. Take a look at Philadelphia, what's been going on. Take a look at Chicago. Take a look at St. Louis.
Every time he says that, you can go ahead and picture Reince Priebus hiding under a desk. Because that's a really dangerous path for the Republican Party to be on legally. The Republican Party is still bound by that consent decree from that case in 1981. That case that was lost by Donald Trump's brother-in-law on behalf of the Republican Party. Because of that case, the Republican Party has promised they are legally bound to not do the kind of racially charged poll watching they got caught doing back in the bad old days in New Jersey in 1981. They've promised not to do it. They are legally bound not to do it through the end of that consent decree. And that consent decree was put in place and has been in place over the years by one way or another since the early 1980s. It is finally set to expire next year. In 2017, the Republican Party would desperately like to get out from under that consent decree that they have been under since the 1980s, but they will not get out from under it if they get caught violating it. They won't get out from under it if they get caught doing racially charged, racially targeted poll watching again, like they used to do and that they got caught for. They will not get out from that consent decree if they actually do what Donald Trump is now asking all Republicans to go do now on his behalf.
Go down to certain areas and watch other communities. Go check out areas. When I say watch, you know what I'm talking about, right? You know what I'm talking about. Take a look at Philadelphia. Take a look at Chicago. Take a look at St. Louis.
Or don't. Or don't. Or don't. I mean, thanks to that old case lost by Donald Trump's brother-in-law in the early 80s, one of this year's more unexpected freakouts within the Republican Party is now officially underway. The Republican Party has now issued a special request to all RNC members to please not do what Donald Trump is asking them to please not gather around polling places in Philadelphia and St. Louis and Chicago or anywhere, no matter what the Republican presidential candidate is saying on the stump. The National Party sent the whole RNC a memo to, quote, remind you of the restrictions placed on the RNC by the consent decree. Quote, you are encouraged not to engage in ballot security activities, even in your personal, state party, or campaign capacity. If you elect to do so, please be aware that the RNC in no way sanctions your activity.
Yeah, but what the hell does that mean? Because the Trump supporters aren't going to pay any attention to this. They're basically going to do what Donald Trump is asking them to do. Now, there's an interesting bit of information on the actual cities that they or Donald Trump has quote unquote targeted.
I mean, right now, as it stands, the Republican Party is legally bound to not do any racially specific poll watching through next year, through 2017. If they do get caught doing it, though, the consent decree gets extended until 2025. And the Republican Party does not want that. They really do not want that. Crazy Eddie's lawyer is now long gone. But it is kind of amazing that it is now his brother-in-law, the Republican nominee for president this year, who's the one screwing up that big case that John Barry lost for the Republican Party back in the 80s. I mean, in the waning days of this election, in these last 2 weeks, Donald Trump is telling his supporters that he doesn't trust the polls anymore, and neither should they. He tweeted this this morning. We have not edited this in any way. See if you can figure out why I'm saying that. This is what he said. Major story that the Dems are making up phony polls in order to suppress the Trump. We are going to win. Democrats are making up phony polls to suppress the Trump. Is that so? Anything could happen. Election day itself may be a freaking hullabaloo, especially if Trump supporters, up to and including the RNC, or not. If they do go try to freelance their own makeshift ballot security task force this year, or what have you. I mean, anything could happen. But right now, the New York Times probability that the Trump will lose this election is 93%. The 538 probability is more conservative. They put his probability of losing right now at 86%. Those are pretty high numbers. It may be that the actual drama in this race is moving down to the question of who's going to control the Senate. 538 says there is a 74% chance the Democrats are going to take the Senate. New York Times puts that probability slightly lower at 67%. Because of those kind of numbers. I mean, 2 weeks out, the story of today is that Democrats are thinking about long term, right? Democrats are thinking about how they can make this a big win for the Democratic Party beyond winning the White House for Hillary Clinton. We've got a bunch of interesting reporting on that subject still ahead tonight, including one race that I think the Democrats are really screwing up. On the other side of the aisle, though, Republicans are also thinking long term. Republicans are looking at Donald Trump and thinking about what else it is they have to lose this year besides the presidency. The Republicans basically know now that picking Donald Trump to be their presidential nominee has almost certainly cost them the White House. What they have to worry about now is whether that's it. Whether the price of choosing Donald Trump might actually be sort of insane. We've got more ahead tonight. Stay with us.
Anyway, I know there's a specific list of states where they targeted African American voters to try to suppress their vote. Now, you can hold me to the names that I mentioned, but I believe that there are a ton of them. Let's start with North Carolina, Georgia, Wisconsin, Kansas, Texas, Indiana, North Dakota, but that was to suppress the vote of Native Americans. Florida, specifically in the Fort Lauderdale area. I did, hopefully I mentioned Pennsylvania, which is the Philadelphia area specifically. Also, I believe the Pittsburgh area was targeted. Dearborn, Michigan. And again, that is an incomplete list. But those are the areas that both the Republican Party, through their state governorships, and if you have been under a rock, you haven't, or you should know about North Carolina and what they did specifically. And the majority of the states that I mentioned were sued and lost in their Court of Appeals, and were supposed to reinstate things like early voting, multiple polling sites, souls to the polls on Sunday. Oh, I did forget about Alabama, where they put in voter ID laws, then closed the DMVs in the black communities all but one day a month. They lost that lawsuit, so they were forced to open them up one day a week instead of one day a month. But this is the Republican Party's love for African Americans. They are trying to take away our right to vote, and hopefully the Democratic Party, or the DNC, which has already filed a lawsuit against the RNC and is seeking to extend for another 8 years the decree that forces them not to do any type of poll monitoring.